In this video, I'm going to show you how to factor a trinomial. And the process for factoring a trinomial is basically to take the three terms, split up this middle term to make it have four terms, and then factor by grouping as we did in the last lesson. So the only thing I really need to show you now is how to turn three terms into four terms. Before we start with any of that, we need to see if there's a greatest common factor. And 3 and 8 have nothing in common, so there's not going to be anything that I can factor out of all of these terms. So what we need to do, anytime there's three terms, I say three terms, t-chart. So I'm going to make this t-chart, and the way I fill in my t-chart, hopefully you remember from last chapter, that this number out in front of the squared term is your a. The number with the term that is not squared is your b, and the coefficient or the constant all by itself is going to be your c. So in my t-chart, we're going to take factors of a times c, and we want those to add up to give me b. So I'm going to take a times c, which is 3 times negative 3, and that gives me negative 9, and I need two numbers that multiply to give me negative 9 that are going to add to give me 8. So if I use these factors that we started with, 3 times negative 3, when I add those, I get 0, and that's not 8. So if I look at and try and think of another factor pair for negative 9, I could do 9 and negative 1. 9 times negative 1 is going to be 8, so this is going to be the set that I want. So this is telling me how I'm going to split up this 8 in the middle. So I'm going to bring down my 3u squared, and I'm going to split up this 8u into a positive 9u and a negative 1u. And if you think about it, 9u minus 1u gives me the 8u. And this is where I came up with those numbers and the signs, because the 9 was positive, the 1 was negative. And then I'm going to bring down this minus 3 from up above. So that comes straight down, this comes straight down, and this middle term is the one that gets broken up. So now I have four terms. I'm going to go like I did in the last chapter, group the first two, group the second two, move that minus sign in with it, put a plus in between. These both have 3u in common. When I factor that out, it leaves me a u. And over here I get plus 3, because 9u divided by 3u gives you 3. And these two, if I want it to match up, I'm going to have to factor out a negative 1, because 1's the only number that goes into 1 and 3. So when I factor out the negative, this turns into a positive u, and this turns into a positive 3. So now these match up, u plus 3, u plus 3. And then from the front, I get 3u minus 1. And that's what I enter into that box. Right, this next problem also has three terms. And since that's b squared and that doesn't have any b's, there's no greatest common factor. So we're going to try and break these up like we did before using three terms t-chart. So here's my t-chart, factors of a times c that add up to b. So my a is 1, my c is 84, so 1 times 84 is 84, and my middle term is 5. So I can look at the sign. Since 84 is positive, I know my factors either have to be positive, both of them, or both of them negative. And since this is a positive, when I add them, they're both going to have to be positive. So if I think about factors of 84, I have 1 and 84. And that's going to give me, when I add those, 89. So that's way too big. I have 2 and 42, which when I add those, I get 44. I have 3 and 28. That's going to give me 31. I can divide by 4, and that gives me 21, which when I add those, I get 25. I could do 6 and 14, which when I add those, I get 20. And I think my other factor is 7 and 12. And that's going to give me 19. And I can't find any other factors of 84. And none of these, since they're both going to be prime, or sorry, both going to be positive, I can't get any way to add up to 5. So since I've listed out all the factors and there's no way to split it up and get that, this trinomial is not factorable. Or another way of saying that is this one is prime. Right, so this example, we're going to continue going through and working through the same process. 25r to the third, 105r squared, and 100r. Well, all of those numbers are divisible by 5, and they all have an r. So the first thing that I'm going to do is factor out 5r. Because if I take 25 times 100, that's going to give me something that's very large and going to probably have quite a few factors. So factoring out this number is going to make it smaller. And plus, I want this to be r squared, this to be r, and the final one to not have any letters with it. So 5r comes out front, and when I divide 25r cubed by 5r, I end up with 5r squared. My middle term is going to be 21r, and my final term is going to be minus 20. Right, so now that I have this 5r, what I might do is go to Math Excel, enter the 5r so that I don't forget about it, and then go and work on factoring the rest of it. Because I don't want to have to carry this along with me as I work through the process. So here is my new trinomial that I'm going to make a t-chart for. Again, factors of a times c, so 5 times negative 20 is negative 100. That adds up to give me positive 21. So again, since these factors are negative, or the 100 is negative, my factors, one has to be positive, one has to be negative, and I have to add up to something that is positive, so the bigger number has to be positive. The more you do these, the better you're going to get at guessing these factors. If for right now you have to write out a few of them, that's fine. But I know that negative 4 times 25 is going to give me a negative 100 when I multiply, and when I add these, I end up with 21. So these are the factors that I'm going to use. Again, I already have this 5r in there. So I'm just going to bring down the 5r squared, split up my middle term using negative 4r, and positive 25r from here, and I haven't changed anything. I've just broken it up into two different groups. And then I'm going to bring down this minus 20 to finish it out. So I take two groups, and these both have an r in common. That leaves me 5r minus 4. And this time I can factor out a 5 from both of these. And when I do that, it leaves me with 5r minus 4. And I know that I'm on the right track because these match up. 5r minus 4. And then from in between, I have r plus 5. And then, since I went ahead and entered it, I know I also have a 5r from where I factored it out at the beginning. So I'm going to type all of this in and then enter my answer. All right, for this final example, we're going to go through the same process. 10 and 3 and 13 don't have anything in common as far as numbers. This has H, this has J, this one has both, so there's nothing that they all have in common. So 3 terms means T-chart. So I need factors of A times C, so 10 times negative 3, which is negative 30, that are going to add up to give me negative 13. All right, since this is negative, one of my factors has to be negative, one of them has to be positive. And since I'm trying to get a negative number, the bigger one has to be the negative. So I know that negative 15 times 2 is going to give me negative 30. And when I add those, I get negative 13. So that's the set that's going to work. So this is what I need to use. Again, I'm going to copy down the 10h squared. And then I'm going to use negative 15 from over here. And this middle one is hj. So I need to put both of those letters here. And then I'm going to get positive 2 hj. And then I bring down my minus 3j squared. So I'm going to do the same thing as before. Group these two, and see what they have in common. So this first set of parentheses, that both numbers are divisible by 5, and they both have an h. Let me put that in there. So 5h, then my parentheses, that leaves me 2h, and then when I factor out of here, I get minus 3j. And the other set, they both have just a j in common. So when I factor out the j, I get 2h minus 3j, because there's squared here and I only factored out 1. My two sets of parentheses match up. 2h minus 3j. And then from in between, I get 5h plus j. And if you ever want to check these on a test or quiz, if you ever want to check to make sure that you're right, you can FOIL them out. And as long as you end up getting that, once you combine these terms that we split up, then you know that your answer is correct. If you have any questions, ask me in class.